Um, at the time did all my camera work, right? And so it definitely took an entire community. And also like I look at it now and I'm like, oh, I see all the mistakes, but like I have to let it go, right? Because like other people can't see it, and it's really just about telling stories in whatever medium, and you know, you can rent equipment, and also like you can make stories with your cell phone, right? Like if you have a smartphone, like you can make short stories that are like 1, 2, 3 minutes long, and like post them up on like all these like social media platforms. And so like I that's why I tell folks like documentaries are my favorite because they tell stories, right? They tell people's truth.
Hey, Dulce,
Yes.
how do you feel? How do you think that Lafa helped mold your identity?
You trying to make me cry? um,
Maybe.
maybe. I mean, so for folks who don't know, like, I mean, Lafa, it saved my life. Between La Familia, and my mom accepting me, and I'll say this, like, it wasn't right off the bat, right? Like, parents have their own coming out process, right? And so she needed time to kind of, come to terms with it, and I was so scared that she was gonna disown me that honestly, like that was kind of like if my mom doesn't accept me, like, I had, suicide ideation kind of stuff. And so for me, like my mom and La Familia were like the things that saved my life, right? That like gave me permission to exist, um and it's beautiful that like this group of like queer, Latinx folks came, and we all make the joke that Christian like came out of the closet first and he left the door wide open, and then the rest of us came, like came out right afterwards, like, okay, well, shit, what's going on out here, and it's amazing because now you have 20 years later, and and some of us are like professors, some of us are doctors, some of us have like our fancy jobs, and it's like we've been each other's lifeline, and we have seen each other through breakups, we have seen each other through marriages and through children and through illness and through like so much. And it's really like find your people is what I'm saying, right? Like, and you don't have to go to like college, right? Like college is not for everyone, but like find your people wherever you are, right? And like that's what you call chosen family. And I'm thankful to have like a blood family that like loves and celebrates me. My mom is like my biggest ally. She made me a goddamn rainbow Christmas tree one year. Like that's how dedicated she is to me. Like she, got down with a big old, gay ass Christmas tree that I don't even think I would put in my own house. But she was like para la niña, right, for Dulce. And so find your people, find your people who are like your ride or dies, and these people are people who not just like are there with you, but also hold you accountable and push you and call you out on your shit too, right? That like you want people that are gonna push you to grow, and um push you to be better, and tend to your younger self, to your inner child. And I'm thankful that I've had these like friendships with you, Eric, with Liliana, with Adeli, for 20 years now, and it's wild to me, and I'm also just like so thankful because I honestly don't know um, where I would be, and my consciousness also came out of Mecha, right? Like I continue to do the activism that I do today. It looks different. Like in Mecha, I was like super in the front lines and the rallies and the boycotts, right? And now it looks different, right? Like I have different capacities, and my activism looks different, and it definitely reminds me that like, again, Mecha and La Familia were definitely so part of like my formation as a person.
Thank you so much, Dulce. May I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, so as someone who like ran and participated in a very like competitive queer film festival, I was wondering what has your experience been like trying to highlight the narratives of queer women of color and femmes in maybe a field or where media oftentimes we see more narratives of queer men, and what has that
Hmm.
experience been like?
Yeah. I'm so thankful that I made this film through the Queer Women of Media Arts Project. Because it's so like for us by us kind of thing, and it's free, right? Like it's like who's gonna teach you like how to make a film in like, I think it was like 10, 13 weeks or something really short. And so you know, when you submit to film festivals, there's like these high fees sometimes, you know, and you gotta pay and you don't always get accepted, right? Like, and I was lucky enough that I got into like Frameline, and Frameline is like, you know, it's funny because I got into Frameline, but I didn't get into Outfest, right? I didn't get out to the one in LA. Frameline opened a lot of doors for me, to be honest with you. Like, you know, other, um, I guess, film, what do you call them? Like film producers, festival producers will attend Frameline and basically pick the films that they want to bring to their film festivals, and that's kind of what happened with me, right? Like, I ended up going to freaking Paris to go show at the Lesbian and Feminist Film Festival, right? And they ended up showing my film twice. Like, never in my, I just wanted to make a film about gordas. That's all I wanted, right? My goal was to make a film. Not lie, y'all. My film was to make a film and like show it at Frameline, right? So like, you know, my plan was that it was gonna screen in June. I was gonna do Pride, right, during June here in San Francisco, and I was gonna move back home in November. That was my plan. I was ready to leave the Bay Area, and I met my partner of 10 years at this film festival volunteering. So if you're single, go volunteer. That's the best way to meet people. No lie. Um, and and you know, like this film in some way like anchored me in the Bay Area, but I also, you know, went out to, you know, so many other places out in the world. And so that's why I tell folks, like, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and volunteering, honestly, and like hustling, right? Like, we always talk about hustling and being rascuacha, and like, just do what you gotta do if you really want to make it happen. And so again, like for me, the film was also like, there's a reason why I never put this film out for free. Like, I always had this plan to like put it on YouTube so that more everybody can see it, but I chose not to because look, 10 years later, like I'm still screening it for like private audiences, right? And it allows me to like go to different places, and it allows me to have a more intimate conversation with people who see the film, because I want it to be a two-way, you know, conversation, right? Like, I don't want someone to just watch the film and like walk away with it, right? Like, I want to hear what their thoughts are. I want to hear what they, you know, got from it. And so, you know, if you are a filmmaker, like, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. I already have like an Excel sheet that another filmmaker shared with me that is like a list of films that you should submit to that are queer. So like, again, community really comes through, right? And you know, networking really helps in these situations.
Thank you so much, Dulce. And I can go ahead and read one of the questions in the chat. So Robert Martinez asked, how did you reach out to the individuals for interviews? You mentioned their significance, but how do you know them yourself?
Um, I'm in like an extrovert to the max. And so I was always in some event or like, you know, volunteering or something. And so again, like, I was a big fan of Joe Gomez because of her book, The Guild of Stories. And so my fam sister used to work at UCSF's Center for Lesbian Research, who at the time the director was Diane Sabin, which is like the white butch woman that you saw there, and she's married to Joe Gomez, and so I got to meet Joe Gomez through my sister fam, and then Cristina La Rosa. I met her at a club. She would throw these like Wednesday night parties for queer women of color, and I went and I met her, and I was like, "You're a chingona, you're a badass. I want to be like you. Who are you?" You know, it's one of those moments where you're like, I don't know if I want to be you or fuck you or both, right? Um, and you know, sometimes you got to make that conscious decision too, right? Like, there's definitely been friends where I'm like, damn, I want both, but I can't, and so I'm gonna make the conscious decision that we should just be friends and not fuck this up, right? And there's definitely some friendships that came out of that, like that. And so with, you know, Joel Gomez and Christine, like, they're just powerhouses up here, and I'm, you know, thankful that I've introduced myself and have been able to like form relationships with them.
Thank you so much for sharing. Is there any other questions from folks in the audience? May I ask a question, just because I was genuinely interested? I was wondering, throughout your time doing this work, and for example, you describing in your film as identifying as a fat queer femme, I was wondering if you ever been met by maybe comments saying, "Oh, don't use fat, that's a derogatory term," or something like that. And if so, how do you respond to those kind of comments or show how you are trying to reclaim the word?
Yeah. Like I try to be mindful. I think depending if, on the audience, like I will use fat for myself because that's what I'm comfortable with. And I will say like bigger body folks or plus size folks, right? But at the end of the day, like there are euphemisms for fat, right? Gordita, chubby, thick, like right. And the reality is that in our society, especially now, like the way that the body positive movement has been co-opted by like really like puffy. I wouldn't even say thick. Maybe puffy, like white people who are a size like 12, right? And like really it's leaving out people, you know, who are fat. We don't talk like super fats, right? Like don't get enough um representation in the world, and if you are really like trying to like do it's not about body positivity, it's about fat liberation. Like that's what it's about, right? Like that if you're committed to like body positivity, you need to start moving yourself from that concept and into the concept of like what is fat liberation, right? And like there's a really good book that just came out that's called like What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by Aubrey Gordon. Go check that out. Like super good book. She's also on Instagram. I think it's like your fat friend or something like that. And it's really about like every cultura, every culture has like so much internalized fat phobia, right? Like I remember being on a diet since I was like 5 years old, all the way up to my quinceañera, right, to my sweet 15, and like and it's funny because like all your aunts and like even my mom's on like a plus size, right? She's thicker, but there's so much internalized fat phobias in so many cultures, right? And like, what is the harm that we're doing with that, right? Like, what does it mean, and how we perceive fat people, right? Like, fat people get hired and they get paid less than their counterparts, right? Like, what does it mean about like our desirability politics, right? Like when we don't see fat people as desirable or as fuckable or as worthy, right, of like love, right? Like we see so many people who are like, oh my god, how did she get him and I can't even get a call back? And it's like, girl, because you have an ugly attitude. That's why, like, and she's popping and she looking good, and so like just really like um language is so powerful, right? So when people have a hard time with the word fat, it's really about me saying like, what is it about that word that makes you feel insecure or that makes you feel threatened? Um, and I always tell people like, say it, fat, fat. Just say the word, fat, 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 fat. Like get used to saying it, right? Like just like we tell folks to get used to saying LGBT, right, and all these things. So it's really just about language and sitting with the uncomfortableness and like unlearning all the toxic shit that our family and our culture and our society and our media has taught us about fat people.
Thank you so much, Dulce.
Yeah. I mean, I want to hear from folks. Like, what did you think about the film, or like, what stood out to y'all? If there's anything. I think my brother's gone. Yeah, he is. I was like, oh my god, my brother's seeing me in lingerie. I had a moment where like, even the Vergüenza sometimes gets a little bit like embarrassed. But yeah, he's gone, so it's okay. Um, but yeah, I want to hear from folks. Like, what are your thoughts, or what are the things that are coming up for you all in seeing this film and um just thinking about like identity, stuff. Don't be shy.
Um, Hi, Dulce. My name is Marisabel. I really love the film. I think it was very beautiful to watch. One thing that stood out was as you were referring to yourself, I don't know if it was Fierce Femme, but you said Fierce Femme with Chola roots. That's something I've been thinking about recently, just because I was born and raised in South Central, and I think like it's a very different experience to be raised in South Central than to just be raised like low income in general.
Mhm.
So yeah, I've just been thinking like a term that like refers to like an upbringing in a specific community is very like yeah, I've just there's something I've been thinking about. So like that that really stood out to me during the film.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. One of the things I didn't put in this short version of the film was like how race and class informs how people perform gender, right? And in this case, like a femme identity, right? And a lot of times femmes get seen as like being like so like what's like materialistic, right? Because it's like I'm a high femme, right? Like I love makeup. I mean, I put on fucking lashes for y'all today, like for a 1 hour little presentation, right? And um, but also like femme is not about what you're wearing. Femme is not about how much or how little lipstick you're wearing or makeup. If you wear high heels or you wear sneakers, like femme is a queer gender identity, right? Like a lot of times people, like especially when like straight women are like, I'm femme, and I'm like, like, are you really though? Like, do you know what that means? And I'm like, have you really questioned your gender, right? So for me, identifying as femme is really questioning like what is my gender, and for my race and my class to inform the way that I perform gender, right? Like, um, I also grew up like working class and poor, and grew up and going to the swap meet and going um to the indoor swap meet and the outdoor swap meet, and making something look really expensive when it was like three for $10, right? So I got the blue one, the red one, and the pink one, right? And also that like my tias, right? Like they would inform, like my tias really informed my way of fam, and the cholas in my neighborhood and the people that I hanged out with, right? Like this weed liner didn't just happen out of nowhere. Like I've been doing this shit since I was 13 behind my mom's back, right? And like as I get older, right, Eric asked like how does baby fam from now dulce fam might change. Like you start thinking about like professionalism in the work setting, right? And like really professionalism is just like really racist white like stuff, right? That like we deem certain hair as not professional or certain makeup, right? And like um and so you start to like navigate those spaces differently, right? And so for me, like saying that I have chola roots is really important because those are the people that I would look up to, and I was like, that eyeliner is real sharp, that eyebrow is like perfectly arched, right? And like my tias who would show up in like sequin dresses to like a barbecue at the park for my nephew's 5th birthday, right? Like there was no reason for them to show up in a dress at a park, but they were like, pues es baile, es fiesta, like we gotta go show up and show out, right? So really like questioning how gender is informed by body size, by race, by class, all these things, all these intersectionalities, right? So yeah. Other questions, thoughts?
May I ask one more question? Just now
Hmm.
that you're talking about the intersection of these various identities, I was wondering what are some recommendations that you would give other queer women of color and femmes, especially when it comes to finding community, given that maybe some queer spaces are exclusive to queer women of color and femmes? What did that look like for you growing up?
I mean, for me, like femme labor heals, right? Like we heal our communities, and so for me, like I'm forever femmes to the front, right? Like I ride or die for femmes. Um, and what I for younger fans, what I would say is like be like be unapologetic about your wants and your desires and who you are, right? Try things out, um, and also like know the difference between like how can I put this? Like there's a difference between like someone admiring you and adoring you and respecting you, right? And someone just wanting to like, be like basically there's a big difference between someone like respecting you, right, and adoring who you are, and you should be treated as a goddess and a diosa and all these things, and someone just being um, with the illusion of who they want you to be, right, or who they need you to be, right? Be who you need yourself to be, right? Like um, be the things that you need that are gonna help you grow and gonna help you expand and like see the world in different ways, and also like be humble, like know when you fuck up, right? Know when you've done harm, right? Like know when there's growth to be happening, and so for me, like it's always again like surround yourself with folks who are gonna like hold you accountable, right? Who are gonna call you out, but also are gonna like root for you, right? Show up for you. Say your name in rooms that you are not in a positive way, right? Like there's a reason that like I have these friendships of 20 years. It's because these people are the ones that like have again like kept me on my path, have held me accountable, have called me out, but also have like held me when I needed to be held, right? And so at the end of the day, it's really about being honest with yourself, about who you are, and everything else will fall in line, right? Like my dad still like we have this don't ask, don't tell. We speak maybe 4 times a year in the big holidays. Um, and I let that go, right? Like I was so determined to have him accept me for being queer and all these things. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, you know what? He's missing out on my life and all the glorious things that are happening in my world, because of his homophobia, right? And you get to a point where you're just kind of like you don't you want to be in a room with people who love you and celebrate you and not people who question you or who are gonna like make you feel like shit, right? Like at some point you reach the point where you're just like you're an adult, I'm an adult, you happen to be my father or you happen to be my mom or my aunt or whoever, but I don't owe you shit, right? Like I don't owe you shit. And the one thing that I will leave you all with is what my mom always tells me, right? She always tells me, solo tú vas a vivir tu vida. You're the only one who's gonna live your life. Ain't nobody else gonna live your life but you. So make the decisions for you, right? Not for anybody else because you want to impress them or you quieres quedar bien, right? You don't want to let anybody down. No. You gotta live your life for you, do you, and be about it. That's it. You gotta be about it because if you're not about it, people are gonna notice. And if if they notice, then like, what's the point, right? So be about it. Have it be if you're gonna choose a path of a major or a job or where you're gonna wear. You just gotta commit and be about it. And pues the rest was it just falls into place. So I'll leave y'all with that with a little nugget of knowledge from my mom.
Thank you so much, Dulce, and thank you,
You're
Manny,
welcome.
for putting this together, for moderating the discussion. And if we could just give Dulce another round of applause, and maybe for those of you who can unmute yourself and do a little applause so that she can hear it, since we're in this different setting.
Thank you, folks.
And so thank you everyone for joining us. I just want to let you know that this is a series, and so this is the second session of the series. We have 2 more on May 25th at 5 p.m. We have Dr. Liliana Gonzalez, who's here with us today as well, navigating academia as a queer Chicanx from the politics of coming out to the privileges of non-passing. And on June 1st, we have Eric Leva, who is still here with us as well, psychology of well-being. And so hopefully you can all join us. They were also part alums from UCI and alums from MECHA and LAFA during that same time period. And then we have one more program tonight with Dr. Shapiro from Ultimed, who's going to be talking about COVID-19 all in Spanish and vaccinations in Spanish. So if you have any family and friends who may be hesitant or want to know the current numbers of COVID-19 and have a discussion with a doctor, that will be tonight at 7 p.m. and we can go ahead and drop the files in the chat right now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.